Darling, we've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind, where is the power? We've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind.
Hey, welcome out there, internet land. This is the oh shit, I already forgot it.
You had the job, you were hired, and now you're fired.
No.
Ideas don't bleed. Ideas don't bleed.
You came in with so much confidence.
Yeah.
That was
I know,
awesome.
right? Okay, let me try again.
I don't know that you get to try again. No, you get to go again.
No,
do
I
it.
feel like this is how you have to open the podcast.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry, but like you also signed that contract.
Yeah, no, it's definitely staying in. That was great.
Hey there, internet. It's us over at the Ideas Don't Bleed podcast, the only one podcast with #1 creators Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly visiting the studio with Ethan Parker, Griffin, Sheridan, and the one and only Matthew Rosenberg here to tickle your brains and put their tongues in your ears.
What? No.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
That's correct.
why did you guys like call it improv?
Is it gonna be okay if we cut that and we put that at the start of every episode, no matter who's guesting?
That's
Is
probably,
that all right?
Yeah, that's probably the permanent opening now.
Yeah.
We've done openings before, and they range from me being sort of lackluster, which in my defense is my brand. Sort of unenthusiastic is sort of what I go for, and Ethan's like a solid B, and then Griffin can come out swinging and do a great job, or he can really just fumble the ball on the intro. But no one has come with that level of enthusiasm, Collin. So
No.
Do you mind if I give us just like, can I give us just an alt, just in case, like when we're in post?
Just in case
Griffin would like to ruin the fun.
Just so we have options in the editing.
in case Collin blew out the mic, we'll have an alternate option. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, here we go.
Hey everybody, welcome to Ideas Don't Bleed, which is a comic book.
Get out of here.
It's my favorite bit. It's my favorite bit. I fucking love it.
That was it. That's what you got. All right.
I'm going to say the rest because we didn't say the rest. It's a podcast presented by Ashcan Press. That's the other part of it. We forget it all the time, but it's presented by Ashcan Press.
Do we have to say that?
Yeah, you said we have to say that. You said that was part of the script.
I guess we're supposed to do that. Whatever. It's not important. None of that's important. The point is that Griffin just tried really hard to keep his job, and I'm not sure it happened, but we'll find out.
That's what everyone's tuning in every week.
Yeah, next week is, does Griffin have a job? Yeah. Probably not, but maybe check in for maybe.
It's the first season of Game of Thrones. Every person who's read the books is like, Ned Stark's going to die next episode. It's going to be next episode. Wait for Ned Stark to get aced. Like, oh, this is going to be great. So congratulations, Griffin.
Yeah,
they'll be talking about your firing for years afterwards.
And then we're going to cut your head off.
Shit.
Yeah,
I've seen Game of Thrones. I get that. I understand that reference.
Yeah, there you go.
Everyone knows what a Ned Stark is. I can drop this shit on the podcast because everyone there's certain weird shit that got like pretty monolithic culturally, and I feel like not all of Game of Thrones did, but like Dragon Queen and Ned Stark. I think you can probably drop both of those.
I feel like that's safe. I was going to say Red Wedding, which isn't exactly that level, but is close. I feel like in a lot of circles, but not all circles, you can be like, oh, it's a Red Wedding, and people will be like, oh yeah.
Fair.
Gun to my head, gun to my balls. Someone said, which one of these characters is Ned Stark? I wouldn't know which one it is.
Did you not watch it?
I've seen and heard about so little of Game of Thrones.
Griffin refuses to watch or read anything that's considered a cultural touchstone.
Yeah, now I'm just picturing like Griffin, as soon as like we're done with this podcast, he goes like hits his BMX, like fucking hops off a railing and then goes like surfing or some shit.
If I could do any of those things, I think it would kind of make up for how culturally unaware I am. But the fact is, I don't. Instead, I go into low power mode when we aren't podcasting. Yeah. And then once they ask me to get a StreamYard link up, and running again, that's when I sort of boot back up.
We're Matt's podcast droids. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very handsome podcast droids.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of it.
I would say.
You should have put that in the intro.
Handsome podcast.
We will. Yeah. We will.
We could drop it all in. I feel like even though Collin did a wonderful job, maybe too wonderful, that'll be discussed for years to come. I feel like I should introduce you guys. We're joined today by my friends, the wonderful writers Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly. People may know their work on things like oh yeah, we're clapping. Okay.
Makes me uncomfortable too. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's great. People may know their work on things like Joyride or Batman Beyond or the current Captain America book or a little thing called Star Trek. They do a lot of stuff. They're writing everything these days, and it's awesome. And I'm very excited to have you guys here. Thanks for coming out.
Absolute pleasure, Matt. I've been ever since I heard you on a podcast, and ever since you many months ago were like, "Hey, would you come on the podcast?" Yeah. I've been like, "When is he going to ask us to be on the pod?" I'm very excited.
That's my thing. I like to.
Every morning he texts me, and he's just like with progressively more and more emojis afterwards.
Yeah, I like to ask everybody, and then I don't follow up with anyone, and it creates this tension that I think is good in all of my relationships.
Yeah,
no.
The entire industry calls it a Rosenberg.
Yeah. I don't get the reference, but yeah, I think that's correct.
That's the one rule is don't tell Matt.
So, I have no idea what that means, but let's run with it. Well, you guys seem incredibly busy because you're writing so much stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time to come hang out with us today. And we wanted to just sort of pick your brains for a little bit about the old comic books and I guess that's it. I don't really have another answer.
It's mostly going to be comic books.
All right. Yeah. So the form was invented in the early 90s.
I would love it. I'm reminded, the one time I went to the Harvey Awards, one of the presenters got up and was like, I know that last year this show ran really long. Well, I'll just say who it was because it's his bit and it was public. It was Bill Willingham. Got up and he was like, I know it ran long last year, so we're going to try and keep it shorter this year. And everyone sort of chuckled. And he was like, I just have 20 minutes to talk about cave paintings. And everyone laughed. And then he did talk about it.
Oh my God, wow.
And I was like, that's an intensely brilliant bit of like weird joke.
But I don't remember bit. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was like Andy Kaufman-esque because the whole audience laughed when he said it. And then he really did talk about cave paintings all the time. And I was like,
mad cantankerous. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. He connected it back to comics eventually. Which I'm going to do now by saying our first question, we ask the softball sort of introductory question, which is why do you guys make comics? What is it about comics that you like? What is it that draws you to it? Do you like them? It's presumptuous. I'm sorry.
No, I mean that's fair. Weirdly, answering that question often makes it sound maybe a little more mercenary than it is because we do both love comics. In fact, it's how we met. But I'll tell you the more like mercenary part first, and then maybe Collin can soften it by telling our actual origin, which will help make sense. We were in screenwriting and it sucked. We were working on a bunch of big studio films and none of it was paying us. We were what they call baby writers, which is a designation you wear no matter what age you are until you sell enough movies that people decide you're no longer a baby writer. And we found it kind of infuriating and really tough. And we were young. We were in our early mid 20s and had a career that didn't make any kind of sense, but it certainly was thrilling. But otherwise it was just, nothing was coming out, and we really desperately wanted to have stories that actually came out. And at the same time, we had a background that was steeped in comics, and it had been a thing that we'd been looking to do for a while, which again, I'll let Collin handle. But from the professional side, it really, and what has become my sort of guiding light on it is it's an immediate medium. It's something where you make it and 6 months later it's out and people are reading it. It's extremely, which may not be immediate for a Substack, but it's immediate for an old fashioned medium. And I love that sense of immediacy. I love that sense of being able to put something together and make it happen. And I love that because the form is not young at all, because it's ancient, but like that the modern version of it is so interested in like playing around with form and structure and page count and presentation and like just how the medium can stretch and the amount of like work you can do in it. It just kind of dwarfs movies in a lot of ways for me. And it just sort of did for a long time. And so we transitioned over the last like decade into, because we've been writing comics for 8 years now. Over that period into basically full-time comics. Like we don't really work in film and TV all that much. We do it here and there, but like our primary work right now is in comics because we love it and because it is a genuine, like, it's a place where you can actually tell stories and they actually come out, which is a truly delightful place.
Sure.
Yeah. And I can go a little deeper on that because Jack says, we've been writing comics for almost 8 years now, but we've been writing together for almost 13, actually a little over 13 if you want to look at it. We met in school. We piled into our friend's PT Cruiser every Wednesday and drove up to the local comic shop, bought our comics, bought an absolute irresponsible amount of comics.
Yeah, none of us we were all like, why did we spend all that money on comics?
But we'd buy our comics, we'd slurp down greasy pizza, we treated them like shit, and we loved every second of it. And that was where Jack and I really built our storytelling kind of teamwork. We were speaking the same language because our shared language was comics. And we were able to kind of sharpen our knives against each other. At the time we were,
that's the nicest way to put it. When we met, he was like, "I don't like this guy," and then we learned mutual respect.
Yeah, exactly. And it was partially through that language of comics. And I think to echo Jack, what we found was that I wouldn't. As Hollywood boys, we eventually had to fire all of our representation because they didn't understand what we were doing. It was too, not to toot our own horns, but innovative and weird and really left of center, which there's really no support of through the major Hollywood system in any way. So we were able to take those stories that we really wanted to tell and bring them to comics, bring them to a format that actually would give a shit, and has ever since encouraged us to be weird. Like some of our most, the stuff that we absolutely, that fans absolutely love is the strange stuff, and that doesn't get support in any other industry really. So
I have a lot of questions about you guys as a duo because like that's something that we've talked to Matt a lot about, because as we mentioned before the show, Griffin and I are working on our first book right now, and we've gotten a lot of warnings. Thank you. We've got a lot of warnings that duos are a risky business, like that. They often fall out, and there's often really troublesome legal stuff and emotional stuff, obviously. And so I have questions about that and about you guys' process. I will right off the bat, I want to ask you guys. You get referred to as the Hive Mind as a duo. It's a good name. It's very marketable. What do you think of ours? We're the Supple Boiz. What do you think of that? What would you grade that?
Supple or supple? What was that?
Supple.
The Supple Boiz?
That's our podcast. That's our brand. I just wanted to see if you guys thought it was good.
You can explain where it came from if you want.
No,
I don't need context. No. I think context might hurt this. I really like it. I think it asks the right kind of questions.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad you're on board.
I know you weren't asking me because I'm not a guest on the show, but I want to go on record for the 12th consecutive episode of saying I fucking hate it. Carry on.
Okay.
I'll admit it has some tripwires. It's not like you guys picked like a really. Here's the thing about Hive Mind. It describes the process and it sounds like something out of a science. And look at the Borg thing, right? So like on both sides of it, it sounds relatively. And
it doesn't sound dirty. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Supple Boiz really does. Like Supple Boiz doesn't like not sound dirty. It sounds.
Are you making horny content on a horniness level? Is your content?
No. It's pretty it's pretty the opposite, honestly.
Right before this, I was editing an hour-and-a-half long conversation about the current state of the box office. What is cinematography like doing anymore?
Nobody could be horny after listening to
that classic Supple Boiz content.
We're called it because Ryan Stegman called us his supple interns, and then after that we just went with it, and now everybody remembers it. Nobody will ever forget it because
if it's already done, then it's been done.
It's kind of a done deal. So I just want to make sure you guys.
By Ryan Stegman. If anyone
then you don't need our approval, sir.
But you should, Jackson. You shouldn't give it to them anyway, even if they want to. Even if they don't want it.
Fair enough, Matt.
Okay.
I'm
but a real question is, we have heard that you guys split your scripts in half, and you'll go away on your separate halves, and then you'll kind of meld them together and do a rewrite. That makes me crazy. I don't understand that.
Ethan actually I hadn't heard this tidbit, and Ethan mentioned it to me the other night, and I heard that, and I was like, oh my god.
I don't understand. Does that ever go wrong for you? Are there difficulties that come with that, or is it super smooth at this point?
As you mentioned, like, we've been doing this for a long enough point that like our voices have become incredibly similar.
Sure.
Like the biggest problems, I'd say the most consistent problem that we hit, and air quotes problem, is oftentimes we'll use the same like scene construction or button because we think of scenes so similarly that we're like, you know what would be fucking sick is if we did use this turn of phrase, and we've literally used the same kind of turn of phrase to button our scenes. Right. But then you look at it and you say, it stopped being a mistake, it became a motif.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes you can back into some really magical shit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. It really, I don't suggest that other people do it this way.
Okay.
We did it this way because it created, because as I said, we came from screenplays, and in screenwriting, sequences and acts and the just general structuralism of the thing means that working in a duo or a trio is not as atypical, nor is it terribly difficult, because you are taking on a sort of discrete section of the thing, and you're doing it with an eye on the rest of the outline.
Yeah.
And then there's always room to rewrite. So it's sort of our natural process. And then we applied it to comics because what we wanted to do was create a sense of total equity. And this actually goes back to like the initial thing you said, where it's like, oh, partnerships seem hard.
Yeah.
They are, right? Unless they aren't. The way that they're not hard, and I seriously think it's true, but it's like you can't prescribe this. It just happens or it doesn't. The way it's not hard is if you have like total 100% trust in your best friend.
Sure.
And then like as cheesy as that sounds, like Collin and I have been best friends for a really long time. I trust him implicitly. He was my best man. I was his best man. We know each other really well. And like, he's like my brother, right? But like in a very like we're fucking.
Yeah, like not in a brotherly way, because I don't swirly you or.
Yeah, no, exactly. There really is like none of that.
Kindest brothers.
Yeah.
We're like Step Brothers from the hit film Step Brothers.
We don't we basically don't fuck with one another. Like that's just not who we are. Like when we work, when we're like, when you approach me about Collin, that's about as 100% serious as I'm ever gonna get about anything. Because like dude means the world to me. And vice versa. And I know like we just have a good relationship. So what that created was a way for me to write 10 pages and know without a shadow of the doubt that I'm going to get 10 cool pages that are going to follow that up and knock that out, say, on a 20-page script.
Sure.
Then, yeah, we'll have a talk about. And like, I might have missed something in a sequence. He might have missed something in a sequence. That will still, like, it's not like the work is like, oh, we come back together and like, boom, you fuse it, boom, you got a script. It's like, no, we sit there generally together at night because we work on nights and weekends and like how, figure out how we do X, Y, or Z part of our story. And we'll rewrite it out and we'll figure it out and we'll talk it through. And maybe we'll have like, maybe we just won't have the motif. And so we'll sit there for a while and we'll have most of a script and we'll be sitting there looking for like, how do we tie this shit together? Like it's good. It's just not cohesive or whatever. And I think, so the way I like to think of it is like, it's like we're in a jazz duo, right? Or like a band. And I trust entirely that Collin knows how to play his instrument. You know what I mean? And knows what the song is up to. And I'm not here to like tell him what to write or how to write. And he's not here to tell me how to write or what to write. But we're here to like check each other and make sure we're like writing the best thing we can, I guess.
Sure. I'm curious about it because I've co-written a bunch of things. The longest I ever did, and we actually did a podcast about it, was I did 10 issues of Uncanny X-Men with Kelly Thompson, Ed Brisson. And we had we cut up every issue and took sections and sort of ran with them. And I thought when it worked well, it worked really well, and when it didn't work well, it really fucking didn't work well. And like Kelly and Ed are two of my closest friends, and I love them to death. And so like, we didn't come out of this like, I mean, I can't speak for them, but I didn't come out of this hating them. And I'm wondering for you guys, like, when it breaks, how bad does it break?
Oh, good one.
Because we have a story we tell about this.
Okay.
Matt heard how you guys are like totally in sync. You completely trust each other. He was like, I don't want to hear any of that shit.
Yeah,
I understand. No.
Tell me the ugly stuff.
Yeah. How bad does it get?
I will say, like, I of the two of us, I have the awful habit of, we call it going rogue. And that's when Collin decides that the outline isn't as good as it should be. And so he starts playing jazz, like we're a jazz going really well. And then the guy on the trumpet just decides to start.
He has a solo he wants to do.
He's playing a solo now. And it's like, this was not where the solo goes. So, I'd say in terms of writing, sometimes you do have to look at the hard truth of like, this is fucking wrong. Right? Like you went rogue, or you just took the outline and took it in a direction that is just really doesn't fucking land. And sometimes that actually absolutely happens, but also like Jack knows that he is not telling his best friend that his writing sucks. Jack is telling his writing partner that the scene he's crafted is not functional for the story. Yeah. And I can hear that and like, am I going to get huffy? Yeah, of course I'm going to get huffy. But like, am I going to get mad? Fuck no. The work has to stand on itself, whatever it takes to get the work there.
You guys are talking a lot about your scripting process. What does the outlining process look like, though?
It's so it's that's actually in some ways where it gets, when you say like when it cracks, how bad does it get?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Really, probably when we're in outline, because outline is for us a conversation. Everything we do comes out of conversation. So we will hang out like we just normally would, but we have discrete like writing hangouts versus like we're just being friends and like, to make sure that the work always feels like the work and it doesn't fuck with the rest of your life.
Sure.
But like we will be, we'll literally have it scheduled. We'll be like, okay, cool. We got to break Batman Beyond. We have this new thing, or we have a pitch coming up. We got to break this. And we will get together and we will we'll just talk about it. And it'll start with Collin saying something, or it'll start with me saying something, and it'll just be like the starting point of like, I don't know, what interests me is this. And then it'll be like, well, why? And then we'll get into that. And mostly we'll talk about our opinions, like individual opinions on the whatever the thing is we're pitching, either a new thing or in this right now we're almost entirely licensed books, right? Like very little creator owned on our side right now. So we're talking about a lot about like what we like about X IP. And that conversation is just like what we did in the comic book shop when we were 19, right? It's the same conversation. And we're just hanging out and talking about that stuff, but we're talking about it with an eye towards how do we turn this into something that we want to do? And sometimes we fundamentally disagree. Like we'll hit a point where it's like Collin's take on this character is straight up different than mine. We're doing something in, we have a Batman Beyond sequel that we're doing right now. And there's a character in it that we just have different opinions on. And we sort of had to like really get into it about like,
is it Batman?
It is not. Yeah. That would probably be a problem here. But we just get into it until we sort of find a place where like, okay, how do we make it both of these? How is there a middle ground between our takes? And is there a thing? Or does one of us kind of like manage to persuade the other, which also can happen? And so we'll just get into that. And to an outside observer, like my wife, there was this one day it got really, really bad. I do not remember what the project was, but we were literally like being like, no, like you're ignorant. You don't know. We were so we were throwing like
ugly bastard.
Totally in my living room, and my wife's sitting on the couch, and she just like playing Ni no Kuni or some shit, and then like Collin, and then we're like, yeah, fuck you, no, and then it's like, but what about this part? And you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. It's like, oh great, let's do that. It's like, fuck yeah, and we sit down and start writing. And then it's outlined, and Colin's like, all right, I'm going to go home. It's like, peace, hi, bye. And Alex turns around and goes, I thought you guys were going to fucking kill each other. And we're like, no, it's just the process. Like, but we figured it out.
Yeah.
That's how bad it gets.
I sort of love that. I said once I was at a, we don't need to go into the gory details, but I was at a Marvel Creative Summit once, and partway through it, I had a thing and I was doing, I believe it was on the Punisher. I know it was on the Punisher. It was the thing I was doing. And it ended up with someone standing up, pounding on the table, cursing at me and screaming at me. And it was intense. And Jason Aaron, God bless his beautiful soul and beard and presence, sort of stepped in and was a calming presence and was like, okay, everyone take a breath. And when we broke for lunch, we went outside and a bunch of the other writers came up and were like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, oh no, that was about creative stuff. Like, that's fine with me. Like, I don't mind getting heated about creative. Like, we're here because we're passionate about these things. Like, that's why we do this job. Like, if someone else is passionate about it, like, I want to hear it. I want to hear their passion. I want to fucking feel it. Like that. And that to me is great. And the fact that you guys can understand that for yourselves and it doesn't get in the way of the friendship is awesome. And the creative process, I really have a ton of love for that.
We love comics, and it's the language that we learn to speak with each other. It's the main thing I read. I mean, like, my bookshelves are behind me, and like, that's comics and that's comics and that's those are RPG books. But everything else is comics. Like, it's become this thing that it rules the work. Like, is the work adding to comics, which is a horrible thing to ask yourself, because, like, you know, then you're like, every book needs to be fucking great. But in all honesty, like, we really do think every book needs to be great. And like, when we feel like we've like laxed that off, or like, oh, like, that book didn't turn out so well, cool, that happens. Like, not every book lands the way that you hope it'll land. But we genuinely try to never get into anything anymore unless we know it could be great. Because we've had the other side of that and been like, okay, yeah, we gotta like check ourselves. So, you know, I think it's just, we do it for the love. Like, you do it for the love of comics, and then you forgive all of the emotional nonsense that comes along the way, because ultimately we're all on the same ship, you know? You know?
That being said, I do have a notebook where I've kept a careful list of every grievance Jackson has ever perpetuated against me, and they will all be avenged.
Sure. And you know what? Like, good on him that it's only one notebook, you know? Like, it feels like it could be a lot more.
Hey, how many subjects? Is that college ruled, wide ruled? What are we talking here?
Front and back, and I have tiny handwriting.
You were talking about how you guys are doing mostly licensed stuff right now. Is there much of a difference in that heat or the emotionality of that between the creator-owned stuff and the licensed stuff?
Licensed is probably harder emotionally.
Really? Interesting.
If I had to guess, just because, like, when it's creator-owned, there is no, like, there's no objective truth in the way that there is in a licensed book. We can argue over X character if X character has pre-existence, but if that character is coming from the hive mind, like, every idea is good. So it's a little easier to probably emotionally to break story.
Okay.
But probably more, obviously more difficult to do it probably than licensed, because there's no scaffolding. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't find that much distinction between the two, but if I had to draw one, I don't know, Colin, what you think? That's my.
I mean, I'd actually probably say it's a little easier to do licensed books, just because you do have the framework and, as you say, the scaffolding to kind of figure out what is. You can read the previous work and discover what is or isn't in tone for the character. But when we're doing our own creator-owned stuff, I mean, those are our babies. Like, I want my children to all have excellent lives and not have anything. And it's like, well, tough. You are going to kill their parent, and that is your fault. But
one of the things I was wondering, this goes back to the thing before, is which one of you would win in a fight if you fought each other?
Oh, like a physical fight?
Colin would win in a fight. I am bigger than Colin, but he is mighty. I will not fight Colin.
Colin, you agree with that?
I'm fucking mean. Jackson is not a fighty boy. He's very he does not take any joy in physical violence. I fucking love smashing things and have very little remorse. So
okay.
yeah,
What do you smash?
Oh, bicycles on the street, occasionally, cars. A lot of plants have taken out my ire.
That one's true.
That's a living thing. Wow.
If there's cones, a cone is always going to get a kick from me. Bird scooters, god damn, I love knocking those things into the street.
Okay.
He's a vandal.
My follow-up question, and maybe this is sort of answered, but you never know. Who among you is best suited for like a post-apocalyptic scenario? Which one do you feel like survives?
That's a good question.
Because it's not just about smashing things.
Oh, I kind of feel like I'm fucked without Collin's handiness, and he's fucked without my survival instinct. Okay. So I think we'd need both of us.
Yeah, I mean, as a duo, we could fucking kick ass in a post-apocalyptic landscape.
Well, especially you add our wives to that too, and it's like, don't even stop. Like Collin's wife will smash all comers with a baseball bat. Easy.
Yep. Oh, she smashes too.
He smashed too. Yes. Oh yeah, we're big.
Wow.
We smash. We smash.
Yeah, wow.
And
is that how you guys met?
And my wife's like mad handy and comes from like settler folk, so she can like make
settler folk.
So we refuse the premise of your question, Matt.
Yeah,
okay, that's fair.
All right, shut up, Matt. Jesus.
These are the kind of things that when I read their work, I'm always wondering. So I get the chance to ask it now because like when we hang out, I can't be like, hey guys, it would be a weird question in a bar.
That would be awesome. You just come up at a con and be like, you ever thought about who in a scenario?
I did actually want to ask, and I spent a long time trying to figure out how to frame this question in a way that isn't insulting, and I don't mean it in an insulting way.
Yeah,
let's go. No, I don't know how to say this, but like,
is this why you asked us who would win in a fight? Yeah. You're like, you wanted to know which one of us was going to kick your ass? Like,
yeah, no, I want to know which one I should hide behind. No, the you guys work on a lot of stuff that I feel like makes sense for you, and you work on a lot of properties that sort of make sense, but they're kind of, and they're not small things. There's like, I don't want to say they're strange, but you guys work in these like, I don't know how to articulate this in a way that isn't like belittling, because I don't mean it in a belittling way, but I'm thinking about like.
No, I find this fascinating.
Like you did like the Alyssa Milano, a book with Alyssa Milano that sort of put you guys on the map. You did the stuff with Brandon Sanderson, but then you're doing like the vast, like the RPG stuff, and then now you're on Star Trek. These are like, there's no connective tissue to all these things other than there's a hungry audience for them that isn't being serviced. And I find that really interesting and sort of can't quite parse, but I'm always like, there's always stuff that comes up that I'm like, I don't know much about that, but I know people really like it. And then you guys are attached to it. And I'm like, are they really good at finding the thing? Or like, are their interests just different? Like, I don't know. Does this make sense at all?
1000%.
You just awkwardly stumbled directly into one of the key, let's say, issues, like one of the key grind points of our brand, to bring us back around to the conversation we were having before we started recording.
Yeah.
Hive mind copyright.
So yeah, we work in many, many different genres. And that does create a lot of problems because we are not very well known for one thing. And that can create a lot of issue because we don't have reputations as the horror guys. We're not your crime guys. What we are often is your problem solving guys.
That's where we started.
Like, you hand us the weird broken thing. You hand us the thing that no one is quite sure what to do with, and we will buff it up and we'll make it shine. And we have we are developing a bit of a reputation, as fixers, which is fucking cool. But it does mean that we end up on stranger projects without a real solid through line somewhere sometimes for fans to really latch onto.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure too.
I understand the problem solver aspect to some degree, but I wouldn't necessarily say that like like if you look at our recent launches and you look at like the stuff that we've done since, because when we came on, it was Hacktivist, which was a problem solved. They'd gone through several writers. They weren't really sure what to do. Alyssa had this idea, but the idea basically boiled down to like, what if Jack Dorsey was a superhero? And they were having a really hard time figuring out like what that actually was. And it was in the middle of the Iranian, in the Green Revolution and this sort of momentary spark in time when we all thought that like social media maybe wasn't awful. And like and we wrote a book about it, and it was like really delightful that we got to do that. And it was a celebrity book, so it always felt like we were immediately going to get discounted, and we kind of knew that. But it was our first chance at doing a book because we didn't have any kind of money with which to like make a comic. You know, I'd spent what little I had to publish my very first thing, this thing Freak Show with our buddy David Serber, who introduced us. And that I wasn't about to go self-publish another book, so we were like, okay, well we'll do Hacktivist. Hacktivist was a problem solve. Our recent stuff, I think what people have come in with, I guess it is to some degree a problem, which is that they like to bring us things that have not traditionally been popular. I think you said it really smart, Matt. Like you keep catching up on new stuff because we're doing it.
Yeah.
Or on stuff because we're doing it. So that's very much what's up, right? Oh, this book doesn't really sell, and never really has. It's not like the book is like crashing right now. It just has never done X, Y, or Z. Great, let's give them a chance to do X, Y, or Z. And it is an interesting reputation to build, but one that I hope leans people into what I think is actually the connective tissue between all of it, which is we are character boys. Like we are character people who are really interested in small character stories. Not perhaps as interested in it as somebody like Tom King, who like seems less and less interested in everything that happens outside of the small room, but is so good at the small room that it's like impossible to look away.
Sure.
I think we're a little more interested in like in going into the small room like a significant amount of time, and then for the other half of the time, and maybe this is the hive mind at work, right? This is like I kind of started in plays and Collin kind of started in like big action movies. And we really like to fuse those things. And I think if you read all of our books, what you'll generally discover is like, even in Hacktivist, that we try to go really, really small and really focus on character and make sure that character is at the center of everything that happens. And then go as big and crazy and almost like Silver Age as possible. Because right now there is such a tendency in comics to play either in like horror, obviously, is like a huge genre right now, and it totally makes sense, but it's just like not our space. We've never really been huge horror fans. Like it's just not our thing. There are great horror books and there's great stuff that we love, but like we tried writing horror once and it was not a great experience. Generally, like we want to fill a space of like big, optimistic, crazy sci-fi fantasy with a psychedelic edge. I guess we grew up on a lot of Morrison and really want to like pay some of that wild thought process forward, and then we try to put that in all of our books. If you look at pretty much everything we do, either by issue 3 or by issue 8, we will have done a psychedelic issue where like where we just like lose panel borders and don't give a crap and just want to like do a tone poem. We did it once as a book called Zojicon. No one read it.
I read
like,
it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. But like we have these, but I think like you have to look deeper to see the threads effectively than you do on maybe a writer who's like more like, I do shit that feels like it's like straight in this genre or straight in this vibe. And that again, I think is part of the hive mind. We have to decide on a tone before we start a book. It's like a thing we do sometimes where we'll be talking about a book and we'll be like, oh, so this is a Joyride, or oh, this is a Zojicon. Kang the Conqueror is a Zojicon. Captain America is like a Hacktivist, but it gets some Joyride in it sometimes. The next thing we're doing is a Joyride.
Do you guys feel like, I know you're both big RPG guys, do you feel like I wouldn't ask this normally because it's not, I tend to think of myself as sort of a character-driven writer. That's sort of what excites me about books more than anything. Like I remember talking to someone and they were like, yeah, this person just makes all the fight scenes just a splash page. And I was like, yeah, that's all I need. Like I just need a splash page of fighting and then I can move on. And I like the aftermath of the fight and the lead up more than I like the fight most of the time. so I wouldn't ask this normally, but do you feel like your RPG roots and love of RPG informs story? Because obviously RPG is so character based and character driven. Do you feel like that's a big influence for you guys?
1000%. Yeah. I used to refer to running. So I ran a Star Trek role playing game for a while. That was my first big encounter with RPGs. I didn't start playing until my 20s. Collin got me into it. We played a World of Darkness campaign, and the GM was like, I'm going to do all these different parties, and we're going to switch them all up. It's going to be awesome. And I was like, I want to do that. That sounds amazing. And then we never did it in that World of Darkness campaign. Like, the parties never crossed over. And I got really frustrated, and I was like, I want to do that. So, but what world do I know well enough to run a role-playing game in? Well, I know Star Trek. So I learned, I built a Star Trek role-playing game out of World of Darkness. I learned how to run like a sketchy version of it, and then rebuilt the character sheet, and then ran the Star Trek game. And I used to refer to it, and it had all these different characters and all these different parties, and we crashed them together and do it. And I used to refer to it as writer push-ups, because I would get done and my brain would be like mush. I'd feel like I just, because they were all great writers. Collin was in the game, like people whose ideas I would immediately want to divert to, right? So. And I was giving them a chance to break out of my world, because I wasn't a great GM. I didn't know how to keep these guys on rails at all. So I was just like, hey, enjoy. Like, how can I keep up with you? And the more that I learned to keep up with them, man, I think the better I became. And I think Collin the same way, like with Champions and with the stuff that he's GM'd. Like it sharpens your brain against that whetstone of like, the story's different now. The idea is different now. This character's dead now. This new thing's happened. This character went left instead of right. Is the story still good? If it isn't, writer push-ups, right? Like, how do you train your brain to have a good solution at all times?
Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our discussion with Jackson Lanzing and Collin Kelly. Make sure to check out Star Trek, Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty, and everything else they're working on by giving them a follow on Twitter at Jackson Lanzing and at CP Kelly. To get the latest episodes of this podcast, as well as news, giveaways, and even comics delivered straight to your inbox, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week for part 2 of our discussion, and in the meantime, you can write to us at ideasdon'tbleedpod@gmail.com, or tweet to Matthew Rosenberg at ashcanpress on Twitter, me at Tales to Astonish, or Griffin at Griff Sheridan. We'll include some of your correspondence on the show, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And big thanks to Summer People for our theme song, Where's the Poison? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Where is the